And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
As always, it's an eventful week here on Glove Up or Shut Up. We had two big shows on Saturday. We had UFC Fight Night 107. We had World Series Fighting 35. We've got Bellator 175 coming up. And that led to a very interesting day for yours truly because I was on the conference call with Rampage and King Mo.
Oh, I'm sure they're very civilized.
No, anything but. Well, they might have been civilized for the first few minutes because I was the first person to ask a question and they weren't too hot with each other yet. But once King Mo made a crack about Rampage being fat, the gloves came off and they started to throw down with each other.
But that's like saying, hey, Mike Tyson, you talk funny.
Yeah, well, that's fine, but Rampage took it personally and King Mo kept needling him, and Rampage started needling him back and saying, "You just mad because I exposed you to the world for having nipple rings."
I
can't make this shit up. That's what he said.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but
read the report at MMA Media. I transcribed all of the colorful parts of this, including King Mo getting the best singer of the whole call on him when Rampage tried to claim that he looked sad after their last fight because he didn't knock out King Mo, and King Mo came back with, "Great spin! You should work for Trump."
Is that the go-to now? If you make a Trump reference, you win the argument?
Well, just the timing of it was funny, coming right at the end of the call after Rampage was trying to resell the idea that he won the fight.
Now, is this a catch weight or is this a normal weight?
Well, that's one of the things they went back and forth about was originally, I guess it was proposed to King Mo that it be at 235 pounds to kind of make it fair for everybody so that neither one of them was too big. But he said, screw it. There's no weight class at 235. It's a heavyweight fight. We're both fighting a heavyweight. And then Rampage said, well, I was going to make 235. And King was like, you can't make 235. You're fat. And then they just keep going back and forth and back and forth.
Have another cheeseburger?
I learned something I had never heard of today. There's a product out there called Flat Tummy Tea.
Oh, God, I have no idea. Go for it.
It's just some kind of herbal tea you're supposed to drink to lose weight, get in shape, or whatever.
All right, who else is on the call? Is it just those two fighters, or were there others?
Just the two of them. Scott Coker didn't even stick around for the first question. I tried to ask him one, and he was already out of there. So it was just King Mo and Rampage batting the ball around with each other.
It's like, I got tickets to a show. I got to go out. You guys take over.
Yeah. Well, King Mo, the other thing that really struck me was that he thinks Rampage has run out of material. He's like,
you need writers. Oh, jeez.
He said Rampage has been telling the same jokes. He's like, I know the whole playbook. Let me tell you. Oh, I'm fat. Oh, my breast stank. Quentin, you need new writers. You're corny, dog. Well,
speaking of Bellator, let's jump into the news. Let's go with a new signing with Bellator. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. Ryan Darth Bader.
Yeah, I don't think that's any surprise. He wasn't happy in UFC. The fact that he couldn't wear his own sponsors. That's what he didn't like.
Well, I'm sure he'll get quite the payday in his first fight because the rumor is he wants an automatic title shot against Phil Davis. It's not like they have a history or anything.
Well, yeah, that's why he wants it, because they have history with each other, and he probably thinks this is my chance to ascend to the Bellator throne right in one fell swoop.
But does that lessen the belt?
I don't know if you can make that argument. I mean, first he'd have to win the fight and get the belt. And second of all, why would it lessen it when the guy who was formerly like number 2, number 3, number 2 all the time in UFC's light heavyweight division is suddenly coming in and winning the Bellator light heavyweight title after being that dominant in UFC? I don't think that hurts at all.
No, I don't think I agree with the automatic title shot for a guy coming out of UFC.
Well, you might think he should go in there and prove it, but then again, what happened to Benson Henderson when he came over? He got an immediate title shot.
Yeah, it's a precedent, though. It's like if you are a named fighter or ranked fighter in the top 5 or former champ or, in the conversation for a title and UFC, you leave that promotion, you walk into Bellator, all right, who's your champ? Bring him. It's like, no. Like, you want to earn a shot at the Bellator title? Fight the number 1 contender. Fight, oh God. It's like 3. I'm like,
you know what you're arguing right now? You're arguing that Ryan Bader should fight King Mo. That's what you're trying to say.
I know. That's the first time I thought. I'm like, wait, he's booked. Oh man. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. I think he should earn it, or hell, maybe have a turn. No, that won't work. It's Bellator. I don't know. I'll still watch the fight. I'm not gonna lie. And there's talk it could happen as soon as the Madison Square Garden show.
Yeah. Well, they've got time. It's not till June 24th, and I suppose that leads into our next topic, is that the Associated Press broke the story this week that Bellator 180, June 24th, Madison Square Garden, will be Chael Sonnen and Wanderlei Silva. The fight that never happened in UFC is finally going down in a Bellator cage.
The semi-main event's a fight that hasn't happened in Bellator yet.
Yeah, that was the original main event for Bellator 172 in San Jose, Fedor Emelianenko and Matt Mitrione. Or, as I wrote in my article about it for MMA Mania, this is their backup plan if either Wanderlei or Chael doesn't get cleared by the New York State Athletic Commission. They still got a fight they can push up to the main event.
Not a bad game plan. I mean, 2 fighters who are gonna have to be approved by the commission, and the commission has already,
They've got a track record for disqualifying people. Look what happened with Rashad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's... I don't know. I mean, it's going to be very telling to see if Chael or Wanderlei make it to the show. Mm-hmm. If not, you've got a guy coming off kidney stones against a former, world champion that is, let's be honest, is probably by June, a year after his last fight?
Yeah.
And that fight was, I'm using the air quotes in that fight because that was a performance more than anything else.
I think I can understand what you're driving at there.
But I'm looking forward to that Bellator show. If we've got, Chael and Wanderlei, Fedor and Meathead, and the possibility of Davis and Bader as on pay-per-view, you put a decent product or a decent promo package in there, and it sells itself.
Yeah, and I'm hearing they're going to offer it at a lower price point than a UFC pay-per-view. I believe the numbers $29.99 and $39.99 have been thrown around, so that would either one would be a bargain compared to a UFC pay-per-view.
Now, I'm not sure about in the States, but does Bellator, if they were on pay-per-view, would it be the same as a UFC or a wrestling show where there's no restrictions to showing it at a bar that maybe, UFC only, you know what I mean?
Well, Bellator does have a sponsored agreement, to show Bellator events at Dave & Buster's, so you'd think if there was going to be any kind of restriction, it would be go see the Bellator pay-per-view at Dave & Buster's, and they might not offer it to other venues like Buffalo Wild Wings, but I don't know if that's actually the case. You're just asking me to speculate, so I'm speculating.
I don't think we have Dave & Buster's or Buffalo Wild Wing up here, but as far as, a UFC could do a power play saying if you showed the Bellator pay-per-view, then you can't have the UFC fight, the International Fight Week card.
I don't know if they really need to play hardball like that because they don't even care because they're counting on 1.5 million people to order the pay-per-view at home. That's all they really care about.
It's true. Let's slightly move into UFC territory because a former UFC fighter it sounds to me like he'll be in jail for the rest of his life, and the least we talk about this, the better, but we have to talk about it.
Yeah, convicted on 29 counts of assault, the former John Copenhaver, better known as War Machine, for his thuggish, vicious, sadistic beating of his girlfriend, Christy Mack. He's going away for a very long time. The only charge I believe that they had hung jury on was attempted murder, but he was convicted on all of the rest.
And when it comes to people who are convicted for assaulting women, don't think they get treated with much respect in prison.
Yeah, there's 2 things you don't want to go to prison as, beating up a woman or beating up a kid.
Yeah, so we won't see him for a long, long time, if ever, and at least that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yep, we can move on.
Let's talk about someone beating someone else. How about Nate Diaz blasting Dana White? You see this on Twitter?
When is he not? When are the Diaz brothers not in a war of words with Dana White?
Stockton, what?
209 bitch slap.
Exactly. Diaz is, there's talk that Dana White has offered Nate a few different fights and Nate's turned them all down. Nate wants Conor. He ain't getting Conor because we're a week later, Stevie, and we're still at the same point we were last week talking about is it or isn't going to happen between Conor and Money Mayweather.
You're talking about it. I'm not. I'm not convinced until they actually sign the paperwork and hold the press conference. I stand firm by that because, as it turns out, I said the exact same thing about Cyborg and Rousey, and I was absolutely right about that. That fight never happened.
The only development that we can report on was Dana White was asked about the fight, and he's been like you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And he did an about face, a 180, and basically said, it's a matter of time before it happens. And it's like, wait, what? And I sent you the link, and I think you were expletive.
Yeah, something like, fuck this shit, it's a done deal when it's a done deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can understand why Diaz wants to fight McGregor. He thinks it's unsettled, unfinished business. But, I mean, he's getting older. I mean, he doesn't have that many years left in the fight game. And he has, say he does an 8-week fight camp. Well, 8-week fight camp, we're in March now, April, May. You could probably have him ready for June. Maybe the International Fight Week if you have him against a decent opponent. But, I mean, the clock is ticking. I mean, what are you going to have? You know what you should do? You should have him fight Khabib when he comes back from summer vacation.
You can come up with all the names that you want and throw them out there, but you can't motivate Nate Diaz that way. He's not going to be motivated by a big fight. He's not going to be motivated by big money. The only thing that Nate Diaz is going to be motivated by is something personal. It has to matter to him.
I can make it better. Nate Diaz only cares about Nate Diaz.
That's exactly right. He's not in it for UFC, and he's not in it to get rich. He's just in it for whatever is good for him.
Well, clock's ticking on Diaz. I mean,
that's fine. They don't care. They don't live by the clock. That I just want to go back to something from the Bellator 175 press conference that's pertinent to this, because when they were going back and forth about who gets more love in the city of Memphis, King Mo or Rampage, Rampage came back with, that's the difference between you and me. You fight for the love of dudes. I don't fight for the love of dudes. I fight for my family. I fight to put my kids through college. And see, that's the same thing going on here with the Diaz brothers is they don't fight for you. They don't fight for the love of the fans. They don't fight for the writers. They fight for themselves. They fight for what's important to them. And that's basically what Rampage was saying is I fight for myself and my family, not for all of you.
Well, we talked about Conor McGregor a minute ago, and his fines have been reduced by the Nevada State Athletic Commission down to $25,000.
Yep.
And 25 hours of community service. So, he'll probably it's like pocket change for him, really, in the community service. I'm sure he can spread it out over X amount of weekends or some event or what have you.
Some public service announcements or something.
Something like that. A little bit of a surprise here, switching to the welterweights. Viscardi Andrade tested positive for steroids.
Yep, and he is writing that provisional suspension while they adjudicate whether or not he's full suspended. But, of course, he may want to appeal and test the B sample and do all that other stuff that always gets brought up.
But if it's coming back dirty, it's a 2-year suspension.
Yeah, he's pretty much screwed.
Yeah. And, we need to talk about a couple of fights before we talk about World Series and UFC that happened this past weekend. There are 2 fights that have been rumored. Mark DeCasey versus Paul Felder. They've been going back and forth on Twitter, and I think that fight will happen probably sooner than Mayweather and McGregor. But the big fight that I'm really looking into as far as hoping down the road, Stephen Thompson against Gunnar Nelson.
I can see it.
I can see the Gunnar Nelson-Stephen Thompson, but that's a fight I really don't see going to the judges.
Probably not.
No, that'll be a war. And As far as fights that have been announced for certain cards, UFC return of David Branch against Krzysztof Joko at UFC 211 in Dallas on May 13th.
That's right.
Derek Lewis and Mark Hunt will main event the UFC Fight Night in New Zealand on June 10th.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that even though he's suing them, they're still giving him fights, and giving him fights on his home turf, no less.
And it's a decent opponent, too.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Hunt, maybe he should just stop worrying about his lawsuit then and just worry about winning a fight.
All right, let's move on to World Series 35 from Verona, New York at the Turning Stone Resort Casino. We talked about it last week. There were 3 title fights in the main card. Blagoy Ivanov beat Sean Jordan in the first round, a minute 43. He knocked his block off, Stevie.
Yeah, this was the only other finish of the card. There were 2 fights that went to a finish. This was one of them, and Jordan, once he felt the power in Blagoy's hands, he was reeling backward real quick. You could tell it was going to be stopped right away because he crashed into the fence. He didn't, gracefully back away and reset and try to clear his head. He was already hurt before Blagoy Ivanov stormed in there, rocked him again, and immediately the ref got in there and waved it off because Jordan was done. He was not going to be able to come back from that.
Do you think he underestimated the sheer power of Blagoy?
I wrote it this way in my preview for MMA Mania. You can make of this whatever you will. I said, and I quote, Sean Jordan is the less successful version of Blagoy Ivanov.
The less successful?
Yes, because they both basically have the same gimmick as they're stocky, powerful, tip the scales at the upper end of the heavyweight limit, but Blagoy has made it work for him being 5'11" and really muscular, and he can throw dudes around, and he's got a lot of beef in his arms, so when he rears back and pops you with that cannon, you drop.
Fair enough. As you mentioned, the other 2 fights here in the main card went to decision. The Harrison-Palmer fight, that was a little bit more entertaining, with Harrison winning 49-46, 48-47, and 48-47. The Magomedov-Frilo fight for the vacant bantamweight title?
Yeah, it was a shutout.
Yeah. So Harrison wins the featherweight, Magomedov wins the bantamweight, and
the vacant bantamweight title.
Vacant bantamweight, yes.
Because Marlon Moraes left. And the interesting part about the Frilo fight was he had previously fought for the inaugural flyweight title, and the exact same thing happened. He got shut out 5 straight rounds in that as well. And then the flyweight champion went back to Russia, never defended the belt.
No. But you gotta think it wasn't back-to-back fights, was it?
Yeah, actually it's back-to-back fights for Frilo. His last fight
back-to-back 5-round fights, and he didn't win a single round.
Yeah, that really sucks for him. I feel bad for him, but you also have to feel like, hey, how many guys get 2 title shots in a row in those circumstances? So clearly they like Frilo a lot, and I know he's with a good team in Las Vegas at Syndicate, so they like him a lot too. It's just he got completely overwhelmed in 2 straight fights. There's just nothing you can do about that.
You won't be getting a third. How about that?
Yeah. And you know what? I would say, for better or worse, Palmer pretty much got overwhelmed in the fight with Harrison too, because there are 2 things that Palmer is known for and that Team Alpha Male is known for, and that's wrestling and chokes. And by my account of watching the fight and covering it for Mania, he never came close to getting Harrison with either of those.
No. And
in fact, by the 4th round, you could hear Harrison's corner openly yelling at him saying, finish this guy. He ain't got nothing for you. You go out there and finish him. He ain't got nothing.
I was expecting a finish.
I'm sure Harrison wanted it, but he'll take the win and the title and remaining undefeated. So good on him and good on Belmore Kickboxing. They got a stud in their camp.
Absolutely. But let's go to the main card here for UFC Fight Night 107, London, England at the O2 Arena. This was the Brad Pickett farewell show, but the main event was Jimmy Manuwa against Corey Anderson.
You know, I want to talk about Brad Pickett first, to be honest.
Absolutely.
The first 2 rounds, as Brad Pickett said himself, were every fight in his career. He was winning, he was doing great, and then he lost.
Yeah, his jaw isn't what it used to be.
No, it hasn't been for about 7 or 8 fights, and it shows when he gets caught. You know what? That's the game. If he's going to win, it's going to be on points, because if he gets clipped, he's going down.
And he got clipped with a head kick at 3:50 of the third round.
Yep. So it's a sad way to go out, but on the other hand, at least Pickett acknowledges that, hey, this was the time because I had my best shot here. I had a great camp. I had 2 great rounds. I couldn't do it, so it's time for me to move on.
Well, let's talk about the aforementioned Gunnar Nelson in the co-main event here. We'll talk about the main event in just a second, but Gunnar Nelson against Alan Jabouin. Guillotine choke, 46 seconds, second round.
Yep. Very convincing.
Yeah. And Jimmy Manuwa, Corey Anderson did not last long either. 3:05 of the first round. Manuwa just knocked him out.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like a... You know, sometimes you see a knockout and you think he can come back from it?
No. This was like Blagoy Ivanov and Sean Jordan, where it was like, nope, this fight's over.
No, I saw the knockout, and you know, I hate to say it, but I hate to think his first words might have been, "Did they build the wall yet?" Because he doesn't know what country he's in right now, because he got knocked the F out.
Yeah, and Jimmy Manuwa predicted as much in his build-up to the fight, and he now believes that that gives him the right to proclaim, you know, he's next in line for Daniel Cormier. Well, at the time we're recording this, he's sitting number 4 in the rankings, and the guy above him, Glover Teixeira, I don't think he's moving up over him, so I don't know if he gets to call the shot like he wants to. I mean, he might have to fight Glover to get in there to face Cormier or Johnson, depending on who wins that fight between the two of them at UFC 210.
An interesting argument, though. I mean, I have no problem putting him in a conversation.
I don't mind him in the conversation. I don't know if Corey Anderson alone proves that he deserves it, because he beat, again, going by the current rankings as we record this, the number 7 guy in the division. You know, if he beat somebody above him and he wanted to call for Cormier or Johnson, okay, but he beat somebody below him. And yes, he did so very convincingly, which is why you can put him in the conversation.
As far as the prelim, one more main event fight here. Arnold Allen beating Makwan Amirkhani with a split decision. 30-27, 30-27, and 28-29. What?
Well, I'll be honest, I skipped over this fight, so I don't even know if that's the right score or not. I only watched the top 3.
I saw 30-27. I don't know what the other judge was thinking.
So you think that Arnold Allen got it then? You don't disagree with that score for him?
No, 2 of the 3 judges got it right. The third one needs his eyes checked.
All right, well.
You think I'm going to start pulling my punches on this show now after how many years?
I don't think you're going to, but I'm just taking your word for it because, like I said, I only saw the top 3 fights and I didn't watch the prelims because, you know what? I had World Series of Fighting to cover, and that was going to be a long show. It was starting at 8 and going until at least midnight, so I had a lot of work to do that night.
But we did have a lot of decisions on the undercard.
We had a lot of decisions on the undercard of both shows.
I know. The only one on the UFC card that did not go to a decision on the undercard was Mark Diakese beating Timu Pakin. I'm not even sure if I saw this I can't remember if I saw this or not, but it was 30 seconds of the first round, so I'm not sure if this got bonus or not.
Well, he got a bonus for it. He got $50,000 per performance of the night.
I'm sure it impressed the UFC brass as well.
Yeah, and Jimmy Manuwa, Gunnar Nelson, and Marlon Vera also got those bonuses, and I guess they could afford to pay him out because attendance was 15,700 and the gate was over 2 million, so they had enough pocket change to throw around for some bonuses.
Now, as far as anything else going on in the world of news before I wrap it up, because there's no shows this week coming up, it's a quiet week. I'm thinking it's because of the March Madness tournament. The Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 are happening this weekend. Maybe that's what's something to do with that.
Yeah, and plus everything is just building up right now for the next UFC, which is UFC 210, as I previously mentioned. So they're putting all their focus on promoting that show on April 8th. They want that one to be really big.
Now, UFC, you think they learned from their mistakes?
What do you mean?
You know the International Fight Week last year?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how many cards they had?
3.
They're doing it again this year.
They like it. They just want fans to stay all weekend and go to every fight card. That's what they're aiming for.
But that's overkill, though.
It is for you and I, but hey, if they're calling it International Fight Week and they're getting people to come in from around the world, they've got to assume those are people that are willing to spend some money because they already came here just to be in Vegas for this whole Fight Week thing. So they probably figured strike while the iron's hot. If we got them here and they're willing to spend money because they spent the money to come here, then they'll go to 3 shows. Whether you and I think it's too much or not doesn't matter.
And one final news note here before we wrap things up for this week. 2 new fights have been added to the UFC Fight Night 112 in Oklahoma City. Johnny Hendricks against Tim Boach.
Oh, that'll be a good fight.
And Dennis Seaver against BJ Penn.
Why?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
I don't want to see that. Dennis Seaver is going to mop up the floor with him. I don't need to see that.
Well, Dennis Seaver doesn't have much power left. Said no one.
Yeah. I was about to say, where are you going with that one? Because I don't agree with you.
I see BJ Penn and Dennis Seaver. If he makes it past the first round, I'll be surprised. Johnny Hendricks, Tim Boach is very intriguing for a lot of different reasons, because it will either show that Hendricks' last fight wasn't a fluke, or it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really curious, and a fight night in Oklahoma City, that's a very intriguing, that's landing out to be a pretty intriguing card. So I'm looking forward to that one. I'm going to circle that one on my calendar for sure before these 2 fights were announced.
Right.
So with that being said, Stevie, what's on tap for Thursday night at AMP?
Oh, well, I hate to say it, but probably the top story is going to be the passing of JR's wife, Jan, and